Guilt is a really common feeling amongst the creatives that I work with. So I've put together a super lovely exercise today that's going to help you write yourself free from guilt. Okay, so before we start to go through the process of writing ourselves free from guilt, I want to explain, why are we writing? Why are we not just chatting and thinking? The thing about guilt is the heaviness that comes with it, the sense of responsibility, the story about how we've got to be there for other people, is a specific way of thinking. So it has a lot of thoughts associated with it. Thoughts about others, thoughts about what they might think of us if we don't do stuff for them. We can often be feeling guilty while we're trying to do something, and so there are thoughts of distraction, there are thoughts of where we should be as opposed to where we are. And so all of this is all about thinking. And so in order to free ourselves from guilt, we need to start thinking in a new way. So that's why we start with writing, because if we just continue to think, we're going to keep continuing to think along the same thoughts, along the same channels. If you imagine those channels like a river. And so if we keep flowing that river down the same path isn't going to change. So what's so fantastic about writing is as soon as we get those thoughts on the page, we see them in a different way. Sometimes as well, what's really lovely about writing, especially when we're using very specific journaling prompts, is we write something we didn't realize. We're like, oh, that's new. I didn't know I was thinking that. Anything new is fantastic. If we're looking to free ourselves from habits or feelings or states of mind that we don't want to be in, we're always looking for something new. Because whenever we're thinking something new, we're no longer in that place. So that's what we want to create today. We want to create a new version, and we're going to do that with writing because it's such a powerful way to create that new version. So here's the first prompt, and you can take a little bit longer with these prompts if you like, but you don't need to take a huge amount of time with them. Sometimes 2 minutes is enough to have an insight. It might be that you want to take 5 or 10 or 15 minutes. So you might want to journal as I'm guiding you through these prompts, or you might want to just keep pausing the video. What you're looking for is when you get to a place where you're like, okay, that's new. I didn't know that was there, or I've never seen that before. I've never felt in this way before. Once you start to feel something new, you know that it's beginning to have an effect. So the first thing that we do with this exercise when we want to write ourselves free from guilt is to start to describe what I call the path of guilt. So remember, I talked about if we keep going down that same path, nothing ever changes, but we want to get really clear about what that path is so that we recognize it. And I'll explain why it's important to recognize it in the next part of the exercise. So take some time, grab your notebook, grab your journal to start to describe what your path of guilt looks like. So you want to be really focusing on the things that are familiar about it. So it may be that there are familiar people on your path of guilt. It may be that you see familiar things. You might see yourself in a very familiar place. Where are you when you start to feel that guilt? It might be that you're like, it's always when I'm on my own. Whenever I'm on my own, I start to feel guilt. So I'm seeing myself on my own. I'm seeing myself in an empty room, and then I start to feel guilt because I'm thinking of the people I should be with. So what do you see around you when you're on that path of guilt? It's also really useful to get a sense of how you feel. So when you're walking or you're flowing down that path of guilt, how are you feeling? Often the feelings associated with guilt are quite heavy. We might refer to this as like a low vibration of energy. If you think, ooh, fun and joy, we're all kind of high, it's like a high vibration. There's a sense of guilt which is quite There's a pit of the stomach feeling, a kind of rock in the belly feeling, or like a heaviness, even a lethargy. Sometimes it can go to anger. So it's still a kind of low frequency, but there's a kind of like fire to it, a kind of rage to it. So what are your feelings? What are your feelings of guilt? It's really useful to start to describe them as located in the body. So rather than just use vocabulary like, I feel angry or I feel annoyed. It's like, well, what's the quality of being annoyed? What's the quality? Where do you feel that in your body? Does it have a speed? Does it have a temperature? Sometimes people see their feelings when they begin to explore them in this way. So they might see that anger as this bright red that's firing in the whole of their upper body. Or they might see their guilt, their heavy, guilty feeling as like a sludge in their feet. So really start to explore what's familiar about the feelings when you're on that path of guilt. And then the final one to really explore in this area when you're describing that path of guilt is to look at how you got there. Because here we are, we're in this place and we're suddenly feeling that guilt. We're like, I shouldn't be doing this. I feel really bad for other people. And it's like, wait, how did I get here? In this moment, it can be a little bit like when you find yourself or you remember yourself in a dream and you're not quite sure how the dream started, but you're suddenly in the dream. And even though you're like, it was a weird dream, how did I not begin to question it? How did I not begin to question that I suddenly found myself in a vat filled with marshmallows? How did I not wonder how I got there? You kind of just do. And as soon as you accept that you're in a vat of marshmallows, the world becomes a bit weird because you're like, this is a kind of world where it's normal to just suddenly arrive in a vat of marshmallows. And so we accept the guilt. If we backtrack and we see how we got into that vat, then we get powerful. So this is probably the hardest one to start to explore. What was that moment before the guilt and then the guilt? Because that's what says that you're on the path. So you can see, oh, well, I was on my own and I was feeling the guilt, but it's like, what happened just before then? Did you go into the room to be on your own and did you bring the guilt in with you? So it's like, yeah, actually, I was already starting to feel guilty before I went to go and do the thing that I wanted to do. Sometimes people will say to me they feel really guilty about writing. So it might be that even before they started to write, they were feeling guilty. They were feeling guilty the moment they thought about writing. So as soon as you go back to that very first moment that you get on the path of guilt, you can then start to write your way out of it because you're like, I'm just about to go on the path of guilt. I recognize it. It's really familiar. I've got all of the signs that I've been journaling on, the feelings, I can see it, I can hear it. And because you've caught yourself just before you got on the path, you're in the most powerful moment to then make a change. So here's where we start to go into that second part of the process. So the change, the way we write our way out of guilt, is to create a different path. So how do you want it to be? So you've got your path of guilt, but you're now totally coming off that and you're looking and you're creating an entirely new way forward. So it's nice to get specific about this because we want to find some tangible details that are going to help show us, this is real. This isn't just like watching a YouTube video and kind of thinking, oh, I wish, wouldn't it be nice to be free of guilt? It's like, no, actually, here are the steps to do it. But we want to get tangible, we want to get specific. So it might be that you're like, okay, I always feel guilty on a Saturday morning when I take time out for me and I go to a yoga class. I always feel guilty because I think I'm leaving the kids, it's the weekend, I really shouldn't be doing this. And you're ready to enjoy that class and not feel guilt. You're ready to say anything associated with that guilt is a path and I can create another path. So we start to write that path. So you start to describe how you want it to be. So if your feelings of guilt are around family members, you might say, whenever I think about doing the thing I want to do, I feel really joyful, and I imagine my family feeling really joyful too. I imagine my kids being really proud of me and thinking, wow, what an amazing role model you are. You redesign it. And this again is why it's so important that you start to write it out. Because when we start to write it, we can really explore it. We can be like, okay, I'm writing out that when I'm heading to my yoga class, I really want to feel good. And then you're like, how can I be more specific? Okay, when I'm going to my yoga class, I want to feel like my heart is just this big, ripe strawberry pulsing with life, so juicy and full of sweetness. Like, oh yeah, you know, I like the sense of that. I like this idea that that's my new path. So you get really creative. The other thing is just the act of writing. It really calms you down. It brings you into this already creative, meditative place. And it's the best state of mind to start to create the new from. So you start to write it out. At least give yourself 2 minutes with this one. So you're describing what you're going to see along this new path, the way that you're going to see life beyond guilt. So the way you're going to see life when you're filled with a lightness, the way you're going to see life when you feel that you have permission, the way it feels to be allowed to do whatever you want to do, what it looks like, what you'd be saying to yourself, oh my God, it's so wonderful to be free. I have such a love for life. So you get all of those specific details down. Without those specific details, your mind is like, this is just something that we're thinking about. It's not real. It's not going to change. Like it's nothing. But as soon as you start to be like, oh yeah, I'd be wearing my favorite leggings, and oh yeah, I'd be having that water bottle with the logo on it, and I'd be driving in my car, and I'd be thinking, oh, you're such a badass. Like you're so super cool, and I'd be feeling warm and fuzzy. Suddenly it's like, oh, this kind of feels real. Like honestly, for a moment, I was in a car and I was off to a yoga class, and then I was like, no, you're not. You're doing a YouTube video. So that's how you can start to really bring the mind in and really create it. So give yourself a few minutes with this one. Now, once you've done that second one where you've been creating your new path, here's what you can expect. Plenty of resistance. So the interesting thing is that when you do that next prompt about writing your new path, you're going to discover some new things that keep you on the path of guilt. What might happen is you start to write your new path and a thought might pop up. Well, you know, it's all very well doing this exercise, but she doesn't really understand what my life is like. She doesn't really understand that I can't take time out. She doesn't really understand that my work is so pressurized that it's all very well thinking about a new path, but it just isn't possible. So any of that resistance, that's what shows you is keeping you on your current path of guilt. And so you're going to get more information. This is why you're going to want to do another pass at creating that new path. And you're going to keep needing to create it until you stop resisting. So how do you do this? You start to write about the new path and you notice any thought and you think, I don't believe it. So then you start to write the new path, but part of that new path is you believing that you're on it, okay? Maybe that you're starting to describe this new path, but you can't imagine it. So you're like, oh, okay, I can't see it yet. So go onto Google Images, Google some images of happiness or Google some images of productivity, whatever you want that new path to be, and be like, oh, that's what it looks like. And then you're going to get ideas and you're going to start to see your path. So anything that's making that new path creation challenging is showing you what you need to do, and it's showing you why you're trapped on that current path of guilt, which is why you're going to write yourself free. Every day you write that new path. Every day you see how much easier you find it. It's not something that happens overnight, my friends. Every day you notice what's keeping me stuck in guilt today, what's weighing me down with my guilt today, and you keep writing that new path. So as you start to write, you're going to get this sense of loosening yourself from that current path of guilt. It's going to get easier. You're going to remember, you're going to be like, oh, that's really interesting. When I first started to design this path, I couldn't really imagine it like a week ago. But now I've got like trees, I've got like flowers, I've got the road, like the road is really nice. I've got some cows in the field beside me, like, wow. And that is going to help you loosen even more. Like the more you see that new path transforming and appearing, the more you're going to start to believe in the process. And that's how you write yourself free. It's not an overnight, but it's a continued practice. So I would love to hear from you. What is it that you feel guilty over? What is it that you would like to write yourself free to do? Please do share that in the comments below, especially if you need any extra guidance and help. And if you love this idea of using journal prompts to make inner transformation, using these writing exercises to transform your life, then you are going to absolutely love the Write No Matter What community. It's a free community. It's filled with entrepreneurs and writers and creative souls and people who just want to make change in their lives. And I'm live in the community every week. And every new member will get a free video masterclass sent to them. So there's no charge to be part of the community, and you'll get weekly content, and we would love to have you join us. So you'll find a link to the Write No Matter What community below. It's going to let you know a little bit more about it, and you'll be able to sign up and you'll be able to start watching that free masterclass straight away. The video is all about how to create and live and earn just the way you want. If you like the sound of that and you're new here, then think about subscribing. I want to take you on a powerful journey to make sure that you achieve your potential. That's my bottom line. That's what we're doing here. So hit subscribe and join it. And I'll see you next week in the next video. Loads of love. Take care.